Good morning, everyone. My name is Sandra King. I'm the Communications and Marketing Director for the city. We're here today to talk about the general obligation bond, and it is an election that's going to be coming up, and you're going to hear all about the benefits to residents, what it's going to affect residents, and why we want you to consider voting for this bond. One of the things that's important to know that we're up here, we can only educate and not advocate according to state statute, which means any paid employee can only give factual information about this GO bond. There are advocates in the community who are going out who can say, this is how we want you to vote and why, but we can't do that. Okay, before we get started, I'd like to introduce some of my colleagues that are going to speak today. First of all, we have Ms. Suzette Sybil, our Assistant City Manager. We've got Kimberly Spill-Cristiano, our Emergency Manager. We have Fire Chief John Jurgel, and our illustrious City Manager, Greg Harrison. So we're going to talk a little bit about what you're going to be hearing about, talking about, and hopefully voting on. One of the things that we're doing is we're putting out materials like this, and I've got some at the front of the room if you want to take some back with you, that are educational materials that we're handing out. We're going to have mailers hitting mailboxes to registered voters in 4 different waves. And believe it or not, there's a science to when you hand out materials. Because people are saying, well, I haven't gotten anything yet. Well, you don't put anything out too soon because people forget by the time the election comes around. Asalita says yes. And you don't put it out too late because it's too late. I've already made up my mind and I don't have the information I need to make an educated decision. So these are going to be hitting mailboxes in the next coming 4 weeks. We also have it set up on our city's website so that you can go to the city's website. We've also got every project listed on that website. So you can go in, click on it, look at the details, look how much that particular project's going to cost, what's in your neighborhood, what's in your parents', your children's neighborhood, so you can make an educated decision on this. We also have phone numbers up there. If you have questions, call us. We'd be more than happy to answer that. One of the things that is important about this election is it's a standalone election. And what does that mean? It means there's nothing else on the ballot for that day in Pompano Beach but this GO bond. People generally will come out and vote for their president, their city commissioner, their county commissioners, the marijuana initiative, whatever it is that gets people out. A lot of people come to the polls. When it's a standalone election, you don't get a lot of people that need to come out, and we're out here to encourage everybody to get out and vote. Tell people you know, get out and vote. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and let Suzette start, but before she starts, I want, in case you don't know about Suzette Sybil, she is an assistant city manager, but she also is very credentialed. She's a certified public accountant, a CPA. She's been in the public sector doing what she's doing in finance for 30 years. Before she came to the city, she worked for KPMG, which is one of the largest accounting and auditing firms in the United States. So Suzette, before becoming an assistant city manager, was in charge of finance. So with that, Suzette Sybil.
Thank you, Sandra. Good morning. As Sandra mentioned, my name is Suzette Sybil, and I'm one of the assistant city managers here at the city. I oversee the city's budget and finance functions. So right now, I'm just going to take the opportunity to run through a few slides just to educate you and provide you with some relevant facts as residents of the city as it relates to the proposed General Obligation Bond Initiative. We also refer to it as GO bonds. So what are general obligation bonds? It's a common tool that's used by cities throughout the state of Florida and throughout Broward County to raise a large, significant amount of funds to be able to greenlight large capital improvement projects throughout those cities. And as you see, the list on the left, what that's showing us is that all of these cities in Broward County, over half of the cities in Broward County, there are 31 cities, currently have general obligation bonds outstanding. That means that they've taken advantage of this very cost-effective financing tool to be able to get a lot done in their cities quickly. Now, Pompano Beach, on the other hand, the last time we issued general obligation bonds was in 1989, 28 years ago. So the city currently has no GO bonds outstanding. So you may ask yourself, well, how have we been able to get done a lot of the improvements you see going on throughout the city of Pompano Beach? And we've been able to do it in two ways. One, when the economy was doing well prior to the recession in 2007, we accumulated surplus funds. And we've been steadily spending those funds down over the last few years on some of the improvements you see going on throughout the city. Unfortunately, we've tapped those funds, we've used them up, we currently have no more in our coffers. So again, this is why we're bringing this initiative to the residents to allow us to raise the dollars to get done what we need to do to move Pompano Beach forward. The second way we've done it is a mechanism referred to as pay-as-you-go. And you may hear that talked about a lot in the community. So let me tell you a little bit about what that means. Pay-as-you-go basically means that every year the City Commission decides that it's going to raise a certain level of taxes, and they're going to put it away in our savings account, the city's savings account or piggy bank. The next year we raise taxes again, let's say $1 million, we put it in the piggy bank. We raise another $1 million the following year until we have enough to actually have enough money in the piggy bank to actually complete a particular project. A good example of that is a fire station. We estimate that it costs about $6 million to construct a fire station. Now, if the commission were to elect to only raise taxes to the tune of $1 million a year, it's going to take us about 6 years to have enough money in that piggy bank to be able to construct that station, and then another 2 years to actually get the construction completed. So again, it takes a lot longer to get that done. Pay-as-you-go, it's an acceptable form of doing things. The cities who have the GO bonds outstanding, they also use pay-as-you-go, but again, it's not the only mechanism they're using. And that's why you see a lot more improvements happening in our neighboring communities compared to Pompano Beach. So we're doing what we can. We've been able to rely on reserve funds and some pay-as-you-go, but we're saying, listen, we want to be on a comparable status with our neighboring communities. So let's move Pompano forward. Let's raise significant funds and get things done quickly so that the current residents in Pompano Beach can enjoy those improvements today. I want to take an opportunity right now and focus on what we see as perceived benefits for our residents. And I'll talk a little bit more about pay-as-you-go and some of the issues associated with that as I go through these benefits. So number one, with bonds, we're able to get significant improvements completed within a few years. We anticipate that if voters approve the GO bonds on March 13, 2018, we would be able to complete the 25 projects throughout the city within a 7-year time frame. Compared to pay-as-you-go, right? For 25 projects, if we were doing pay-as-you-go, it could take us 50 years, 100 years to complete the same projects. And unfortunately, some of our residents don't have the luxury of waiting that long to see all these improvements completed. So again, a very significant advantage with the GO bonds. Second bullet point, we want to be able to spread the taxpayer impact over 30 years, right? I mean, the commission can elect to get a large number of projects done per year, but to do that, they would have to raise the millage rate and significantly raise property taxes to be able to make an impact in those 25 projects. We're saying to the residents, allow us to issue the bonds, borrow $175 million to greenlight the 25 projects throughout the city, and get them done in 7 years and spread out the impact, them paying back that obligation over a 30-year period. Third bullet point, very important, both current and future residents share the cost and benefits and the improvements. Let's go back a little bit and talk about the fire station example. So we talked about the fact that the commission can elect to construct a fire station pay-as-you-go, right? $1 million a year in the piggy bank, $1 million a year, $1 million a year, and so forth. Well, the issue with that is only current residents are putting money in the piggy bank, right, under pay-as-you-go model. So if by year 8, when we finally construct that fire station, if someone moves to the city in year 9, year 10, and so forth, they didn't actually share in the cost. They didn't put money in the piggy bank. But now they get to enjoy the benefits of that fire station in terms of possible reduced response times. So what we're saying here is if we issue the bonds, we raise a lot of money up front, and basically current and future residents get to pay the bonds back, but not only pay them back, but they both get to enjoy the benefits at the same time. So why should just the current residents pay the burden and cost for those projects? Let's spread it over time, and that's why we're proposing GO bonds. Fourth bullet point, take advantage of current construction costs versus paying more in future years with pay-as-you-go funding. So another problem with pay-as-you-go is that it takes a while to accumulate the funding, right? And what happens to the cost of construction materials potentially over the time that you're putting money in the piggy bank? They increase, right? Because we have inflation. So the cost of concrete, the cost of iron, and so forth increases, steel, etc. With the bonds, we're saying let's realize the present value of money today, and let's get those projects done at the $175 million. Because that same fire station under pay-as-you-go, which costs $6 million today, could potentially cost the taxpayers $8 million 6 years from now when we finally have enough in the piggy bank to get it constructed. And you can only imagine for $175 million in projects, if we waited and did those pay-as-you-go, what that $175 would become 10 years from now, 15 years from now. So again, just another added benefit to the taxpayers to allow us to raise the money now and take advantage of today's construction prices. Secure free money, a very important point. And what I mean by this is grant funding. Now, the federal and state government occasionally make announcement that they have grant money available. We love grant money here at the city. We have a pretty robust grant program staff, and we do pursue actively what we can. Now, the problem with grants is that a lot of times they require what's referred to as matching funds. So that means that when the federal government makes an announcement that there's a grant available, and we go to the table to apply, they say, Pompano, you're not going to get all the money you're asking for. You need to come up front and put 50% of the cost of that project on the table. A good example of that are the improvements that we're working on now for Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. That's a $7 million project. And Horatio Danovich, our CIP manager, was able to successfully apply for a Tiger grant, but we had to come to the table with half of that $7 million, so $3.5 million. So again, for us to even be in the ballgame to compete with the 31 cities in the county and all the cities in Florida potentially for these grant monies, we have to be able to come to the table and provide matching funds. Now imagine if we're able to raise $175 million from the GO bonds. That gives us quite a competitive advantage over neighboring communities because, again, we can play in the game. No matching funds, we can't even compete for those grant fundings. So what we're asking residents to do is to allow us to raise the bond proceeds and leverage the $175 million to aggressively pursue grant monies as they become available. Now, the president the other night in his State of Union address basically said that they're planning to roll out a $1.6 trillion infrastructure initiative. But what many may not have noticed is that they also mentioned that matching funds were going to be a requirement. So again, we're excited, we're waiting for that. It's been said for a year, 2 years now that he's rolling out an infrastructure initiative in terms of grant funding. But again, to compete with other cities and to apply for those grants, we have to be able to bring matching funds to the table, and we just don't have it right now. We really need the bond funds to allow us to do that. Local business participation. This is a very important initiative for the city. It's something that's been raised at commission meetings time and time again over the last year, 2 years. And the city right now is working on enhancing its outreach efforts among various departments in the city to ensure that qualified and eligible businesses in the city are able to participate when we issue solicitations for contract awards. So if $175 million in proceeds are approved by the voters, we plan to aggressively enhance that outreach effort to ensure that our local qualified vendors can participate in those contract awards, either as primaries or subs in the different trade areas. Another thing I want to point out about local participation is we estimate that if the bonds are approved and we're rolling out $175 million in construction projects and activity, we estimate that it's going to create 300 short-term jobs. What I mean by that is when we award a contract to the contractor, he hires his people, and then they have to buy supplies from the Home Depot and the Lowe's, and then that spurs Home Depot and Lowe's to want to hire temporary help. So again, over that 7-year period that we will be rolling out the projects, we anticipate that it's going to create a local stimulus, and of course, residents in the city would have the opportunity to apply for those short-term jobs as well. Attract private investment. Now, this is very important. So what this means, it's estimated that for every dollar that the city invests in our public infrastructure, it's estimated that the private sector will invest about $2.50. for streetscape type improvements. So if we invest in our streetscape or roads or sidewalks in our major corridors, when they see this, it attracts them to the city and it makes them want to invest in Pompano Beach. And we love that, right? Because we get others to now help us beautify the city and expand our tax base. So that's a great thing. And we've seen that time and time again in the city. The CRA invested about $12 million in the city's beachfront. And because of that investment in our public infrastructure, we were able to get the attention of a private developer. And I don't know if most of you are aware, but if you've been down to the beach lately, you'll see that the Beach House restaurant is almost completed. It should be completed in the next few weeks. And the restaurant next door to it broke ground a few weeks ago, the Oceanic restaurant. They're also planning a BurgerFi, a Kilwins, and other retail type businesses in the area, as well as a hotel over the next few years. So again, we invested in our public infrastructure, and because of that investment, it attracted the private sector. Now, another reason why attracting the private sector is important is we want to expand our tax base, because the more people we get to move to the city, the more residential development that goes in, the more new businesses come to Pompano Beach, it expands the number of people that are paying taxes into the city's coffers. And what that means, hopefully, is that over time, current residents should pay less taxes, because the more people sharing that tax liability, the more it spreads that impact across that tax base. So again, another benefit to current residents. We're also looking to increase non-property tax revenues. So if we're beautifying our city and the private sector is continuing to invest in Pompano, the hopes is that we attract more visitors, more tourists to the city, and then they in turn are spending in the existing businesses, but we're also attracting new businesses. So the city relies a lot on property tax revenues, right? It's our main revenue source for funding our operations, but we also get revenues from other sources, sales tax revenues. So when someone goes into an existing business in the city and they purchase a shirt or goods, we get sales tax revenue through the state of Florida. Now, with this enhanced retail sales that we expect to see, if these projects come to fruition, we expect that our sales tax revenues to the city should increase, and over time, we expect to have less of a reliance on property taxes. So again, that reduces over time the tax burden to the residents in the city, another added benefit. So on March 13, 2018, the city will be holding a special election, and we'll be asking Pompano Beach voters to approve GO bonds in 3 separate ballot questions to greenlight a total of 25 projects throughout the city. Now you may ask yourself, why 3 separate ballot questions, right? And I got a lot of flack for this as we were going through the process. Why not just one question? Well, believe it or not, the state of Florida has very strict rules when it comes to developing ballot questions as it relates to general obligation bonds. So they did require us to group similar projects into separate ballot questions. So we ended up with 3 separate ballot questions, and I'm just going to take the opportunity now to walk you through what they look like. Ballot question number 1 relates to proposed streets, sidewalks, bridges, and streetscaping projects. And here we're asking voters to consider approving $79 million to allow the city to fund projects in this category. And we have a total of 9 proposed projects currently in this category. Now we are asking voters to either vote for the bonds or against the bonds. People said to us, why not put yes or no, right? Seems simpler, people can relate more. Again, the state of Florida has very strict rules, so we were limited to for the bonds or against the bonds. But again, for the bonds would be voting yes for the bonds, and against the bonds would be voting no. Ballot question number 2 relates to our proposed parks, recreational, and leisure projects. And again, very similar to ballot question number 1 in terms of the format. The only difference is that here we're asking voters to consider approving $56 million in bonds to finance projects in that category. And again, we have about 10 projects proposed in that category. Ballot question number 3, which is the final question, relates to our proposed public safety projects. Again, similar format. The only thing that changes is the dollar amount of the bonds that we're asking voters to consider approving. In this case, $46 million. Now, residents always want to know, how is this going to impact me? What's the estimated tax impact to me as a resident? So here we have an example. We estimate that it's going to cost about, for every $1,000 of taxable property value, it's going to cost residents about 60 cents per year. So as an example, if they own a property that has $100,000 taxable property value, we estimate it's going to cost them $60 a year. or $5 a month, right? Now, one of the things we're doing to spread out that impact is we're actually recommending to the commission that if the voters approve the total of $175 million, which is the total of the three amounts you saw in the three separate ballot questions, that we be allowed to sell the bonds in two phases. So voters are going to authorize potentially $180 million in bonds. But we're going to come to the commission in the fall and say, let's only sell half of those bonds initially. And we're doing that for two reasons. One, we want to minimize or spread out the tax impact even more to our residents. So here, this is what we estimate the impact would be if we sold the whole $180 million worth of bonds. So if we only sell half in the fall of this year, if the initiative passes, the impact for a $100,000 taxable property would be a $30 a year impact. And then 3 years from now, we would come back to the commission to sell the remaining $90 million in bonds. Another reason we're recommending that is because a lot of these projects, they span across our parks, or roads, or streets, or fire stations, and you can only imagine the headache if we tried to roll out 25 projects simultaneously, right? We would get complaints for the residents in the city. So again, this will allow us to roll out the projects in a more manageable fashion as well. We always like to point this out to the residents. Every dollar of Go Pompano would be spent on improvements right here in Pompano Beach. So all of the planned improvements for the 25 projects throughout the city would be done here in Pompano Beach to the benefit of the residents of Pompano Beach. So one of our overarching reasons for doing this is we want to raise money to address our aging infrastructure asset. Now, Pompano Beach is over 100 years old. And I don't know if many of you know, but since the 1960s, our population has grown by almost 600%. Now, some of that has been due to annexation in past years, but certainly we have our fair share of people moving to the city. Now, with more people using our infrastructure, or roads, or streets, or beaches, or sidewalks, or fire station, it puts a wear on those assets over time, right? And at some point, you have to stop and say, let's invest significantly in these assets. Let's move Pompano forward, invest in the future of our residents, and invest in these assets and extend their useful lives. Because we're going to pay one way or another, right? You still have to maintain the assets, right? If the roofs are leaking and you don't want to replace it, you're still going to be doling out maintenance dollars to make those fixes. And what you're doing is throwing good money after bad. We want to stop the Band-Aid fixes and invest significantly in those assets and extend their lives another 50 years. Think of it like your homes. It's no different, right? You have a roof on your house. Nobody wants to shell out the $25,000, $30,000 to replace the roof. But if every 6 months you're calling the guy in to repair your roof and it's costing you thousands of dollars, it just doesn't make sense anymore, right? It's going to end up costing you more in the long run. So we're asking voters to consider this in the same way. This is what we're asking you to do in terms of our infrastructure assets in the city. Just think of it the same way as your homes or your vehicle. So again, the first bucket of projects is streets, sidewalks, bridges, and streetscaping projects. Again, we're asking voters to approve 9 projects in this category. And what we're hoping to do is design the projects to reduce traffic, lower commute times, and reduce flooding here in the city. And the projects span an array of areas, including replacement of bridges or repairing the bridges, widening of sidewalks, pedestrian crossing enhancements, landscaping, undergrounding of utilities on A1A, just to name a few. Now, this is an example of some improvements we've already undertaken on Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. It's a collage of pictures, very nice. You see the decorative lighting, the wider sidewalks, decorative benching, a lot of nice landscaping, and of course the unglamorous things that people don't see is all the drainage work that was done to address flooding issues on this major corridor in the city. So a number of the streetscape and streets projects that we're proposing are other major corridors in the city, and we hope to carry the same complete streetscape concept throughout those major corridors. So that includes Dixie Highway, McNabb Road, and A1A as a few examples. We're also proposing bridge improvements. This is a conceptual picture of McNabb Bridge, and we are proposing to replace the McNabb Road Bridge. So again, a conceptual picture here of what that might look like. Second category of project, parks, recreation, and leisure projects. We're proposing 10 projects in this category. And our objective with addressing parks is to create stable neighborhoods, strong communities, and create more enhanced spaces for our youth to take part in constructive activities. We know that our parks are widely used. It's an affordable space for our residents to enjoy, so we certainly want to continue to invest in that infrastructure here in the city. We also want to provide more places for family gatherings, celebrations, and special events. Again, the parks are widely used of any of our assets in the city besides the beach. Over time, we anticipate by investing in our parks that we should see an increase in property values in neighboring communities around those parks. Now, this is one of the projects on the Go Bond list. It's the amphitheater. The picture on the left is what the amphitheater looks like today. The picture on the right is showing you a canopy. We are proposing a new canopy covering for the amphitheater, and this is simply to enhance activity and revenues for that facility. Right now, if there's poor weather conditions, we can't use the facility. Sometimes concerts have to get canceled. So again, we're kind of looking ahead on how to enhance the residents of the facility and ultimately to provide a better experience for the residents here in Pompano Beach. We're also proposing improvements to the concession and restroom areas as well for that facility. McNair Park improvements. This is a significant project that we have on the list. We're proposing an almost $11 million investment into McNair Park. We're enhancing the football field. The yellow lines that you see around the field is the first track field here in Pompano Beach, so that will be new. There's a new water feature, and we have some enhanced soccer fields on the bottom right of the screen there. So again, an almost $11 million investment into this park is what we're proposing. Centennial Park. We are proposing a new pavilion be placed on that site, and this will allow residents to rent out the facility for special occasions such as weddings, bar mitzvahs, and other special occasions. We're also proposing a new upscale senior citizen activity center in the northwest sector of the city. Now, this is just a conceptual picture right now. If voters were to approve the Go Bonds in March, we would be working with our design team and the community in terms of what the final design of that facility would look like and the different amenities it would offer. Final bucket of projects, public safety. We are proposing a total of 6 projects in this category. And with that, I'll turn it over to Kimberly Spill-Cristiano, the city's emergency manager.
Thank you, Suzette. Well, good morning, everyone. I think we all know disasters are an unfortunate part of our reality. You don't have to look any further than turning on your TV and seeing a disaster somewhere in the country, in our state, in our backyard. You know, we've incurred disasters over the years, and what this project entails is the Emergency Operations Center. Okay, I'm not sure if you're aware, but we currently operate out of a makeshift EOC, Emergency Operations Center. It's out of the water treatment plant. And, you know, again, it's a makeshift facility, what we've kind of adapted and band-aided and so forth. What we use this center for, obviously, is during disasters and during times of disaster, what we do is we centralize all of our government functions there. So we can prioritize public safety issues together and work together and make sure that, you know, if there is a communications issue, that we are all there and working together to accommodate public safety. And also, never to forget economic stability. Right? We don't want to lose the tourism dollars. We don't want to lose the snowbirds who enjoy being here. We enjoy daily life here, full-time residents. So we want to make this, you know, ensure the stability of our community. So economic stability is always critical. We recently conducted an independent review, and we had an outside consultant come in and evaluate us for preparedness, response, and recovery issues during times of disaster. What that study found, it just concluded, and what it found was that we really could do a better job. We have some improvements and enhancements that are definitely needed to our facilities. Right now, we cannot accommodate the growth that this city's incurred. And this facility, it's not manageable for what we have in front of us. So, regard to communications, telecommunications, internet, and also our living conditions for our folks. Right now, people sleep under their desks during the time of disaster, and we're all kind of working together. There's not even a different area to go to eat, to sleep, to anything. And, you know, recently we were there for 4 days straight. So there's a lot of improvements that can be made. But that's pretty much what you see here in this project, and it's the Operations Center. So thank you again for your time. And with that, I'll introduce Fire Chief John Durgle, who will be discussing the next project.
Thank you, Kimberly. Good morning, everyone. As Kimberly said, my name is John Durgle. I'm the fire chief here for your fire department. It's an honor and a privilege to be here today, and I commend you for coming out and taking the initiative to learn about these projects. They're important to our city, they're important to the fire department, and I hope that this information will help you. As we said, my goal is to educate you. My goal is to educate you not only on this bond, but also on your fire department. With that being said, a lot of people in our city aren't aware of a fact that this fire department is one of the best fire departments in the country. And I don't say that because I'm the fire chief. I say that because an independent organization, the Insurance Service Organization, ISO, has come out and rated our fire department, and we are rated a Class 1 fire department. Less than 0.5% of all the fire departments in the country, over 46,000 fire departments have been evaluated, and less than 0.5% of those have attained that Class 1 ISO rating. So that is a commitment to the men and women of this city, this department that worked hard to get that. And I tell you that because we offer fire rescue services here. And in our business, time is critical. That's what we are measured by, time. When ISO came here, they evaluated many, many things, our water supply, our station locations, but one of the most critical things they evaluated was our response time. And as I tell you, time is critical in what we do for a business. Time can be our enemy or time can be our friend. For example, if you have a fire in your house, one of the most common fires is a unattended cooking fire, kitchen fire, right? That fire doubles in size every 60 seconds. So a small fire that may start just in the French fries that you're frying, right, in a matter of minutes is into your cabinets, is into your wall. And what started as a small fire in a matter of minutes is a huge fire that engulfs your whole house. Obviously, time is your enemy in that situation. Time is the firefighter's enemy in that situation, because the more time that clicks off, the more difficult it is for them to effect a rescue, to save your life, to put the fire out, and the more dangerous it is for them to perform their job. Time is an enemy in that case. If we get there quickly, if you call quickly, if we have a strategically placed fire station that is close, time is our friend. We get there quickly, many times they'll come in and just put that fire out with an extinguisher. Another example, in a medical situation, as I said, we do fire and EMS here, right? Unfortunately, if someone has a cardiac arrest, their heart stops. Every minute that they remain in cardiac arrest, the chances of recovery decrease by 10%. Time is our enemy. Time is your enemy if that's you. If that's your family member, time is your enemy. If we are strategically placed in our fire stations, if we can get there quickly, the chances of the paramedics when they show up, doing their job, cardio, shocking people, giving them meds, works in our favor. Time is our friend the quicker we get there. So you can see the importance of the location of stations and time in this business. I tell you that because our fire stations are over 40 years old, actually closer to 50 years old. As we've mentioned, think about your house 50 years ago, right? Our family has grown in 50 years. Our starter home that we had 40 years ago, 50 years ago, does not fit our family. It does not fit our fire trucks. The roofs are leaking. A few weeks ago in one of our fire stations, we had raw sewage back up into the station. I will tell you that as the fire chief here, that is a safety issue for not only our employees, but here in the city. Because if I have to close one of those fire stations because it's unsafe for my employees, time becomes our enemy. Time becomes your enemy if you live in that zone, because now fire stations have to come from outside that area. It is absolutely critical that we get these fire stations rebuilt so that we keep them in the zones, so that we can maintain our response times. And in this bond, we have an additional fire station. We run nearly 31,000 calls in this city. Currently, we have 6 fire stations. We are at our capacity to maintain our excellent response time. This 7th station will help alleviate some of the call volume on our units so that we can maintain that excellent response time, so we can maintain that ISO rating. And incidentally, ISO, the Insurance Service Organization, they are the organization that works with your insurance companies, whether it be your house or your business, to set your insurance rates. With an ISO 1 rating, you get the best possible insurance rate. If we were to close down fire stations, increase our response time, our ISO rating will drop. Not only is there a safety issue there, there's a monetary issue there, both for businesses as well as your residents. So I want to reiterate to you the importance of time in your life, the importance of strategically placed fire stations, and the importance of us maintaining excellent response times in this city. I'm not sure if many people realize, but Ocean Rescue is under the auspice of the fire department. Not only do the Ocean Rescue folks have probably one of the best views in the city, they actually have one of the best offices in the facility. The only problem is that's not their office right now, what you see up there. It is not a conceptual design. It is actually the design of the proposed Ocean Rescue lifeguard towers that we want to build. The current lifeguards are in towers that are old, dilapidated. The understructures of these towers are actually starting to collapse. I was planning on spending an hour. I spent 15 minutes in one of these towers, and I couldn't take it anymore. The airflow in the towers was just ridiculously uncomfortable and hot. The sight lines, the view, because Ocean Rescue, ideally Ocean Rescue works in prevention and never has to make a rescue, but their job, and one of the primary ways that they protect people in the water, is to have a view of the water. The sight lines in our own old towers are problematic for our Ocean Rescue guards. These new towers, as you can see, are iconic in the way they're designed. They have much better sight lines so that the Ocean Rescue guards can do a better job in protecting our over 1 million residents and visitors to our beaches. They're more ergonomically designed for our lifeguards so they can rapidly exit the tower should they need to. Obviously, the colors and the marking mechanisms on these towers, we believe, are absolutely iconic. If you think of all the towers in Broward County, it's not until you get to Miami Beach that you see something like this. So when we put these towers on our beach, we will be the only ones in Broward County with this color scheme. Most importantly, or equally as importantly, you'll see a numbering system on there that is different than anything I've ever seen. The lifeguards have developed this. They work closely with us in the development of these towers. But when you look at that numbering system, not only is it a number, but there's different sea life assigned to each tower. The thought behind that, and the reason we know we wanted to do this, was one of the main things, or another one of the main things that lifeguards do on the beach is reunite lost children with their parents. And oftentimes, young children may not know the number, but they know a color, or they know the sea life. So if someone goes to the beach, and they get separated from their child, they don't have to expect their child to come back to a white standard tower with a standard number. They can explain to their child, come back to the green tower with the fish on it, or the blue tower with the starfish. So these are things that we absolutely know will increase the safety on the beach and make our lifeguards' jobs on the beach a little bit easier for them to do. Again, I thank you for your time. If you have any questions, we'll be available after.
Thanks, Chief. I'm Greg Harrison. I'm your city manager, and I sincerely appreciate your time and attention on this issue this morning. I want to explain how we got here. At the end of 2014, the last quarter of 2014, we did an exercise with about 24 key city employees, and we went through all of the old plans, the strategic plan, Parks and Recreation plan, wastewater plans, things of that nature. And we identified over $300 million in unfunded projects that were really needed, seriously needed. So at that time, the decision was made to go for a bond issue, very similar to what we're presenting here this morning. We started working on that, meeting one-on-one with the mayor and the city commissioners at the time. We had everything ready for a presentation to the city commission in the last quarter of 2015. And then we were approached by the county and the MPO about the penny. Remember the penny sales tax election in November of 2016? So we thought, wow, that would be a great way to raise all of this $300 million and do all of these projects a third of the payments for that debt would be by tourists and visitors coming into the city, and would be an ideal way to do that. But that was a county-wide vote. We did really good here in Pompano Beach, but the rest of the county turned it down. So we went right back to the drawing board, knowing that this needs to be done. We did one-on-one meetings again. Now we have 2 new city commissioners, so we kind of go through this whole exercise all over again. And we came up with a project list totaling $175 million. And we sort of backed into that because we didn't want to throw too much at the residents at one time. And the way that we essentially made the decision was very simple. We calculated the 60 cents per thousand, equating to $60 a year on $100,000 of taxable value, $5 a month. And if we sold half the bonds for the first 3 years, that's $2.50 a month. So $2.50 a month for the first 3 years, going into the 6th year of the taxes, $5 a month for $175 million. The mayor and the city commission agreed, approved the resolution for these projects, and we're going to have this election on March 13th. All we're asking is that you talk to your families, your friends, your neighbors, and you educate them on what you've learned today. And if you or any of them have any questions, please refer them to us because we want every question answered. And also, if you belong to a group that has not heard our presentation, we've been going around practically every night giving presentations on what you've just seen on the bond issue. And we are going to do our best to go to everyone that wants us to come and make this presentation. So, you know, there's a very simple saying that way back when I was a little young thing with my grandfather, I followed him around like a puppy dog. And I complained to him about how busy he was. He made his living buying and selling livestock. And he said, if you stay still, you're going backwards. We don't want to get in a situation where almost to a point where we're going to have to stay still. We don't want to go backwards in Pompano Beach. We want to go forward. We want to replace this old infrastructure, and we want to improve the quality of life.